My name's Rebecca Reid. I am the Okima for Water Warriors YEG here in Edmonton.
My question is kind of like, what I would like to know about your experiences with encampments and consumption sites around the Boyle-McCauley area, because that has been an issue around there for a long time. So I think maybe you have a lot of experience there, and just what are your experiences with that?
Okay, so I've been doing this type of work for over 20 years now. So I grew up along the Highway of Tears in British Columbia, and then moved here to Alberta in my teens, and grew up in small town Alberta as well, and then moved here to the big city about the age of 30. I'm a little bit older than I look. So when I moved to the big city here, I was just shocked to find out that there were people that were unhoused, that had no place to sleep, nothing to eat, that kind of thing. And the way I was raised, we never had that in small town Alberta. Everybody took care of everybody. So I started volunteering about 20 years ago. Water Warriors didn't officially start until the pandemic started, because when the pandemic happened, the city of Edmonton shut down all access to water and sanitation for the unhoused folks. So the group that I was working with at the time had a food truck. It was super awesome. We'd work all morning, prep for the food, load up the food truck, go out directly to the people and serve them hot meals. It was super awesome. But when the pandemic hit, that group got shut down because AHS shut down all of the food trucks. Any unnecessary businesses and that kind of thing went along with them, I'm sure, as you remember. So I'm like, well, what's going to happen now? Who's going to serve these folks, right? So it was me and three friends and a borrowed wagon and 4 flats of water, and out we went. I didn't know much about harm reduction or consumption sites back then. I knew all about the usage. I mean, you can definitely see people out on the street using substances. And with my people, with Indigenous people, there's a lot of alcoholism out there as well, and it's just due to the trauma and the residential schools, the day schools, the 60 schools, all of that trauma that happened. They're trying to dull that. And having problems just being able to access culture and things like that. The second year into starting Water Warriors, I actually lost my niece to poisoning. And that was really, really hard. I'm so sorry. During that first year, I learned a lot about harm reduction, and then when I lost my niece Sarah, I full barrel. That was my thing. I was the new harm reduction warrior. The folks need to be able to have those clean supplies. We should have clean substances out there as well, but that's not something that we really do, or this government is willing to do right now. People don't understand there's so much stigma around people who use drugs and how they got there. Even with the unhoused people, a lot of people just assume that, they can just wake up the next day and go and get a job, and get rid of their problem, and that's not the reality of how things work. We have a lot of unhoused folks around the Boyle-McCauley area because that's where a lot of their resources are, and people are going to stay closer to the resources. But we also know that there are folks that don't want to be near the people who are using the substances. So they'll go and hide away in the river valley, as hidden as they can possibly be. Before this whole encampment crackdown, we were serving people that had been there for years in the same spot. They kept their area clean. They just didn't have the resources to be able to function, to be able to get that housing. And the problem has worsened so much since the pandemic. The folks doubled in numbers. I think it was the first year, and was about 2,000. And then we went up to about 3,500. Now we're sitting at about 5,000, and that's just the people that are on the by names list. So that's the people who are going in and registering to use services. That is not the full count of people, and we know that. We know that there's probably between 7,500 and 8,000 unhoused individuals here in the city of Edmonton. So it's a giant deal. These folks need housing over anything, and then housing, supportive housing especially, would help eliminate a lot of the problems that we have as a city, and would also start saving the city money, because the emergency calls to the hospitals all the time for these folks are super duper expensive, and supportive housing could fix that and bring those costs down. It could help the times with waiting in the hospital as well, because there wouldn't be so many people trying to access all the time or that are there for emergencies. Yeah, it's a giant onion, many layers of all of the things that are going on for these folks that we're serving downtown.
I see. So you mentioned how the issues got a lot worse during COVID. Why do you think that is? I'm kind of curious, because I know how COVID was probably really hard for a lot of people, but for these individuals especially, probably. I'm just wondering why and what might have caused that, because like you said, the numbers sort of increased dramatically.
Well, if you think about economics, okay, during COVID, a lot of people lost their businesses because there was nobody to go into their businesses due to lockdown. Even now today, there's restaurants closing left, right, and center because nobody can afford those things anymore. And you could just sort of see the steady decline of people not being able to afford those luxuries anymore. COVID kind of wrecked us as a species, and lots of people got sick. They got long COVID so that they couldn't work any longer. I know myself, I was so careful but ended up getting it once because the people that I was with didn't disclose to me that they were infected. It's a long recovery afterwards if you get it pretty good. You're looking at 6 months or so before that whole brain fog goes away and you're actually operating at a normal level again. So yeah, just with the economy and everything, and then it's even worse now because we're seeing new faces out on the street every single week. A lot of folks are like that one paycheck away from being able to afford or not afford to be living in a home, and they have to make some tough decisions sometimes over how to be able to maintain that roof over their head. And the population also grew really quickly in Edmonton, and they didn't make any plans for that happening. So there's not enough housing. There's 1% housing available right now, vacancy rate here in Edmonton. And so there's not enough places either. I see anyhow when I'm traveling around the city, giant lots that are empty and open, and there's no construction going on there. I was reading that the developers won't come in and build a building unless they know that they're going to get that return, right? And with the way that the rents are going up right now, a lot of people can't afford to be able to rent in a new space either. So.
I see. So it's I'm a little bit curious about the spread of, I guess, the houseless demographic around the city, because a lot of services, like you said, are concentrated downtown in the Boyle-McCauley area. But just because the services are concentrated there doesn't mean that there's not a lot of people around the city that also can't afford housing and are struggling from issues such as that. So it's I'm wondering, is it an even spread around the city where there are individuals struggling a lot just all around, or is it just all or mostly in that McCauley area?
Okay, so there's been a big difference in the last year talking about the last 12 months. Prior to that, all of my experiences was with encampments. Folks would set up their tents and their shelters and things like that, and they'd stay where they were for as long as they possibly could before they were told to be moved on, right? The city passed a thing, I think it was just before Christmas last year, basically putting a war on the unhoused population. Tents and tarps no longer allowed. Fences put up around empty fields and things like that. I'm sure you heard about the encampment enforcement. Do you live in Chinatown or live near Chinatown?
No, I am an intern there. I work there. I do a lot of volunteering there, but I don't live there.
Okay. So anywhere where there was a tarp or tent or whatever, like they may have given them the grace to stay overnight, but by morning they had to move all of their things. So the way it works now, they're not given any notice. Prior, they were given at least 48 hours notice. They had a little sticker that was put on their tent that had the bylaw quoted and all this kind of stuff, and it told them when they had to be moved by. So that would give folks enough time to pack up their meager belongings into a shopping cart or whatever it was that they had and be able to move on to another spot. The way it works now, there's no notice. The team pulls up. They have a little tote. The person is told that whatever they want to keep needs to fit in this tote. They have 5 minutes. When you're not at full capacity, so if you're using substances, if you have PTSD of any kind, FASD, any kind of that kind of health issue, you can't make decisions properly, right? So they're leaving things behind and they're getting destroyed, like IDs and healthcare numbers and that kind of stuff. And every single time they have to start over. So the rest of their belongings get destroyed. So their tents get slashed and the white trucks come in and everything is thrown into the white truck and it gets put into the landfill. This is happening to folks now every 2 or 3 days. So there's lots of reasons why folks won't go into shelters, and especially Indigenous people. The population of the Edmonton unhoused community is approximately 60% Indigenous. Winnipeg is the only other city that has a higher population of Indigenous unhoused folks. There's a lot of religious trauma in the Indigenous community because of the residential schools, the day schools, 60 school. So they don't want to go into a shelter that has any sort of religious anything, because there is that trauma there. Hope Mission is the largest shelter here in Edmonton, and unfortunately they are a religious organization. And that's one of the reasons why folks won't go in there. We've heard reports of people getting their things stolen by the staff. We've heard reports of gender diverse people being assigned a gender and having to go into whatever area that was without their consent. Couples are not allowed to stay together. Pets can't go into shelters. You're woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning or earlier. Well, not earlier, but you're woken up very early in the morning. They used to do that with very loud hymnal music over the PA system. I don't think they do that anymore. I think they've finally stopped doing that, but they were doing that for some time. Mats on the floor, so you're not actually getting a bed. It was just a mat on the floor before. Now still you don't have a private space, right? So there's problems with sleeping, because you're listening to people snoring or crying or coughing or, just having a hard time. We're very privileged being house people because when we have a mental breakdown, we can do that in our homes, cry in private away from everybody else's view. But the folks we're talking about, everything's on public display for them, right? Violence is a big thing in shelters too. They're not a nice place to stay, so a lot of people just choose not to. And Indigenous folks, nature's our thing, so outdoors is just a better option than being shut up and having no freedoms whatsoever in these spaces that we're talking about.
So I guess one of my main questions would be why do you think, you kind of sort of touched on it a little bit, but why do you think that there are so many Indigenous individuals that suffer from drug consumption and houselessness in Edmonton? What do you think we can, as Edmonton, can do to make that better for that community?
Oh boy, there's lots of reconciliation that needs to happen. Culture is a big thing. So the residential schools and the day schools and the 60 scoop, the kids were taken away from their parents. They were torn away from all of that culture. When you're raised in a family that doesn't know how to parent or how to have a loving relationship, that passes on for several generations before that's going to disappear. So they need supports. They need to get that culture back, that healing. It's one of the things that Water Warriors tries to do when we're out, is to be able to provide medicines to folks when we have them. So I will have smudge for people so that they can smudge and pray, and we give them tobacco. So that can be helpful there. But just regular healing stuff, we need access to sweat lodges again. We need access to our ceremonies. Anything inner city is there's not a lot of the bigger powwows and stuff like that. You have to travel out of town to be able to go to those kinds of things. There are some round dances that happen in the city, which are super awesome to be able to go to and things like that, but we need more of that kind of thing. We need, the drumming, the singing, the dancing, all of those parts of our culture, our language back. So the statement land back doesn't mean we want to kick everybody out. That means there needs to be that balance back, right? That we were guardians of the land. We don't own it. We don't own the land.
You share it?
We share it, yeah, and we take care of it, right? That's that whole premise.
I see, thank you. I guess, what are some misconceptions about our unhoused neighbors or people who are recovering from drug addiction, and what do you wish that people would think differently about these people? Because I know there are so many stereotypes, misconceptions about these individuals that are that need help, and I'm just wondering, what do you wish people thought differently, or what do you wish people knew?
A lot of the folks that we serve, we've developed connections with, right, and relationships with, and they're human beings just like everyone else, so there's so much stigma attached to these folks. There are some folks that can maybe look threatening or sort of have that threatening body language when you first see them, but that's as a protection for themselves. Most of the folks you can go up and talk to and approach and everything, all they want is for you to look them in the eyes and talk to them and listen to them like another human being. They're often treated like they're disposable, like they're garbage, like they don't matter. They all have a story, and some of them just want for somebody to sit there, see them, listen to them. They need to be heard, they need to be seen.
So I guess I kind of looked on your website a little bit and learned about you guys before contacting you guys, and your website did say that a lot of your volunteers had lived experiences. So what do you think makes those volunteers with lived experiences want to give back to the community? Because a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but there are people who have lived experiences that don't want to be involved in this again because of their trauma, their PTSD with being unhoused and with struggling with drug abuse. So what do you think makes some of your volunteers want to go back and to give back to the people that suffer similar issues as them?
Some of the folks that volunteer for us are actually folks that we helped.
Oh, really?
Yes. They just saw how giving. We try to be giving. We try to be loving. We try to be compassionate. We try to teach all of the new volunteers that come on, don't ask what's wrong with them. Ask what happened to them, right? Because we have to take that trauma-informed lens when we're looking at folks. And, they're so thankful for what we were able to help them with that they want to be able to return that and pass that on, pay it forward to someone else. And those are the folks that we find that are going to be successful down the road. The ones that don't want to have anything to do with that community any longer are the ones that we find in the future are usually the ones that are going to struggle a little bit more.
Why is that?
They're not looking through that lens. Like, that happened to me and that was awful, and maybe I should take some time to reflect on that, maybe talk to a mental health person or an elder or something like that, and sort of deal with that trauma, and not let that affect the rest of my life. It's hard, but healing from that kind of stuff is super duper hard.
I guess you've been running this, or you and your team have been running this organization for around 4 years, right? And are there similar organizations such as you guys who are trying to help with this issue in the city?
Yes, we're the largest one in Edmonton. And I think that's just because of the premise that we have with the volunteers, where we want to be inclusive and we want to sort of operate as a team and a family, and everybody has an input. So it's not a bunch of bosses up here and then everybody else. We're a team. That's it. And we operate off Indigenous principles of, like, in Indigenous culture, no one gets left behind. Everybody takes care of everybody. So if you have more, you're going to share with somebody that has less. And that's how all Indigenous people work. And that's how the volunteer people work as well, and we stress to our volunteers, because some of them are marginally housed, I guess, and they can't afford things. So we always tell everyone, if you have a need today, you make sure that you eat. If you need clothing off of the clothing truck, you go get that. I'm not sure that other organizations operate the same way that we do. They're kind of similar, because that's kind of what we tried to base everything off of, was how that they operate. And there's lots of little ones around, but we're trying to make sure that we're always on the up and up. AHS has specific standards for groups that do outreach, and one of those is to be above the wire as far as food preparation is concerned. And that's why we don't serve hot meals, because technically if you're serving hot meals, you need to have a permit to do that. They have to be prepared in a commercial or an AHS approved kitchen. And a lot of the groups that are out there, actually, they're preparing all the stuff in their homes and then bringing it to give to the community. And there's nothing wrong with that, don't get me wrong. But there's certain holding hot temperatures, and certain timings, like your food is good for 2 hours, and if it's not in somebody's belly in 2 hours, you can get really sick from that, and it should be thrown out, and a lot of groups don't take that into consideration. When we're feeding our folks too, a lot of them can't chew, right? They have dental issues because they haven't been able to go and get medical attention. A lot of them have gastrointestinal issues because they haven't eaten in a long time. They're not getting the proper nutrition. So when you go and you give these poor folks a whole great big huge heaping helping of curry, that's not going to go into the guts very well, and they're going to probably get the runs and get pretty sick from that kind of thing. So there's just so many tiny little things to take into consideration, and we try and do all of that. And we've built relationships with folks for 4 years now, so we would love to see a bunch of little groups all working together to make an impact, but there's a lot of egos involved too, so everybody's got to get along and play well together in the sandbox to be able to make those kinds of things work.
So what are some things you want to see in the future with all of these little groups and your group? What hopes you have for the future, and goals that you have for your own group and the other groups around trying to help in Edmonton?
Well, we weren't ever planning on being around this long. We were only supposed to be around for the pandemic, and then we're going to just say goodbye. But here we are now. We are no longer an option. We're a necessity. We couldn't even bear to think of not going out on a Thursday night anymore because these people are depending on us to show up. They know we pull up on Thursday night at this time. So everybody's word of mouth now. If you need stuff, here's where you go, right? So we're gonna be doing this for a long time from the looks of it, because the problem's only getting worse, not getting better. The issue with all of the groups here in town now, though, is volunteerism and the donations, right? Being able to volunteer for a group is actually a privilege if you think about it. If you're somebody who can't afford the bus ticket to get down to be able to volunteer where everybody is, you're not going to be able to go, right? Or gas even, right? So burnout is a thing as well. We try and encourage folks, if you're not having a good night, don't come out. You need to take care of your mental health. You need to fill your cup up before you're going out to serve other people. And I have to lead by example sometimes for that. It's hard sometimes to say, no, sorry, I'm not good, I can't come out. The donations now are an issue as well, because nobody has a lot of extra cash to spend on anything any longer. So getting the money in, or getting money is harder to get in than physical donations right now. So awesome. Go through your winter closet and take those jackets out that you aren't using anymore, and we'll make sure they get to people that are going to use them. But trying to get monetary donations for the food that we hand out and the water we hand out, it's getting harder and harder to be able to get that done. Luckily, we have built a reputation over the past 4 years, so that more people know about us now. But I'm not one of those people that's going to be tooting my own horn all the time or paying for advertising, because I want every penny that's possible to go to the folks that need it, right? So as a group, yes, we do want to grow, and we would love to have a food truck someday. That would be amazing, because we'd like to serve people where they are. So a lot of groups will go and set out tables in front of Hope Mission or something like that and get everybody to come to them. That's why we have wagons. We want to go to the people, right? And we used to go all over the inner city when there were still encampments, because we'd see the tents. We'd have people driving around during the week and watching where people were, and then we'd take the wagons to them every Thursday. And we still do that with our Sunday team. They hike the river valley and they find the encampments, and they hand them out backpacks full of supplies. But yeah, someday a food truck again would be an amazing opportunity. But there's lots of, little steps to be able to get there. And right now, with the way donations are, it's going to be a little tough to get there.
Because I really like what you're doing with the wagons, because some of these folks have mobility issues.
Exactly.
And have, some people just can't mentally do that. They just don't want to go out there and get up. And I think that's also a big issue that I don't see a lot of groups considering. So I really like that you guys are doing that. Also, what's kind of like the procedure of like a day where you're helping people? You give them the necessities, and you guys like stay there and connect with them. Kind of like, basically, I would like to know what a day in your work kind of looks like.
Oh gosh, I'll give you the Thursday, because the Thursday is the biggest day. I'm working behind the scenes no matter what every day. I'm the one who's answering the emails and telling folks where they can drop off donations and doing the social media and that kind of stuff. I got a lot put on my plate because we don't have enough volunteers right now. So Thursday we have a broadcast system, which is super amazing. So the volunteers, this technology helps so much. The volunteers can opt in for a text message. So in the morning I'm entering in, okay, here's the link to the RSVP. So that has all of the information on where we're meeting, what time we're meeting, a little blurb about what we do. And then there's also a link to the waiver, because of course we have to have that, as a group. And then an option to opt out. If you don't want these text messages anymore, you just say stop. You won't get them anymore on your phone. This has been amazing for us, because then we don't have to worry about Facebook. A lot of people don't like Facebook anymore, especially the younger groups. So a lot of folks are opting out not to want to have anything to do with social media anymore. So we do have our website, and we do have a Discord group now as well, just to try and get everybody in there. But the text message is the ultimate thing. It's awesome. So start out the morning by doing that. We have to make sure that the organizer group, who's coming, who do we have to use as team leaders, so we can kind of plan out a couple of days before who you're going to have and what you're going to do. The U-Haul driver has always been a pain in my butt. Nobody likes doing that job. It's a long night, that's why. It starts at 4:30 in the afternoon and they go till 10. We have sandwich preparation the night before, so we have a team that does nothing but mix those sandwiches with love. They make sure that they put them in our refrigerator, in our storage warehouse, so that they're kept at temperature properly. At 3 o'clock, I'm doing shopping, so I'm picking up lots of water, the single-serve snacks that we need to hand out, going to the warehouse, meeting the driver. We have to sign out that U-Haul, get all the paperwork done for that. Then we go down into the warehouse. Between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, we're loading that U-Haul up with all of our stuff. So all the clothing, all the wagons, safety vests, lots of stuff to load up. Driver pulls off. We meet in the parking lot at 5:30. We get the wagons out, load all of those up. We have a tailgate meeting for the team, like a safety meeting, to let everybody know what we're going to do, where we're going to go. This is our safety word. This is our safety procedure. Here's your team leaders. Who has naloxone? Who knows how to use it? Everybody's picking a wagon or a position that they're, comfortable in to serve as volunteers for the evening, and away we go. We usually, before we used to have quite a wide range of where we're going. We used to split into two teams, and away we would go, and we would keep in communication with one another through the radios. Now that there's no more encampments, we're kind of having to go to a centralized spot, more or less, where people are. And the folks that are mobile will come up to the wagons and form a line, and they'll get the things that they need. And then we have team leaders that are walking around in pairs and just checking to see for folks that are not getting up, or, you know, if you're warm and snuggled in your blanket, you're not going to want to get up and go get lunch, you know, so we make sure that we bring a bag to those folks and ask them if there's anything else that they need. The truck team is handing out all of the warm clothing and blankets and things like that. We don't hand out a lot of tents or tarps anymore unless it's like an emergency situation where somebody's lost everything, because they're not allowed anymore. Like, they're going to get confiscated or destroyed, you know, so we don't even get a lot of ask for those anymore, but blankets are like gold.
So, like, without the temps and tarts, and a lot of individuals don't want to go to those, like those Hope Mission, what do you call
the
them?
shelters?
Shelters, yeah. A lot of people don't want to go to the shelters. Like, where do those people stay?
Outside.
Just like on the streets?
Yes. Huddled up in doorways with one another, trying to keep warm. If they can find a tarp or a blanket, they'll wrap themselves up in that, or they'll set up against a fence. You know, like the fence is here, and like a lean-to sort of idea. Put as many people under there as they can to help keep them warm. You're going to see lots and lots of news articles about fires coming up. Abandoned houses or places that are being newly built, often folks will try and sneak in there so that they have, you know, some shelter for away from the wind. They may not be heated, but that's still warmer than staying outside in the elements where you're getting wet with snow or whatever, right? But they want a source of heat as well, so they're bringing in stuff and lighting it on fire, and then ending up, unfortunately, lighting buildings on fire. Trap houses is usually what they're called, right? There was an explosion yesterday as an example, so somebody was probably lighting a fire and got a propane tank too close to that fire, and the propane tank exploded. We never hear who it was or if there were any injuries or anything like that, you know, because these folks are not considered to be human beings, they're just disposable. So.
I think that what I'm confused about is, like, instead of spending all this money, instead of the government spending all this money getting teams to, like, shoo people out, take away their stuff, because those people who they're hiring to do that, you need money to hire them, right? Why don't they put that money towards building more buildings and building safer places for people? And also, it's like, why is it that organizations the shelter organizations, why are so many of them, like, religiously affiliated? How come there's not a lot that's just there and not, like, part of a specific religion or under, like, a specific religious organization? Why aren't there more of those? For Hope Mission specifically, like, that's the main religious one here in Edmonton. They've been around for forever and ever. I don't even know how old they are, honestly. George Spady Center is also a mission. It was a mission when it started. But they're no longer a religious organization. They are the ones that take in people that are using substances. They don't have a sober policy. This is another problem with a lot of the shelters. You need to be sober to go into that shelter. Hope Mission does have an intox now. So if you're intoxicated, you can go into that area, but
the amount of shelter beds that we have for intoxicated people in Edmonton are not enough, right? There are some shelters that have just started up as well that are run by Indigenous organizations, which is amazing. But again, there's only so much money to fund these places, and there's only so many beds to go around. There's not enough beds at all. And you are right. If they spend all that money that they've been spending on fencing and the wages for all of these folks that are cleaning up that all of the encampments, all the extra police people that they need to do the enforcement, it's millions of dollars, and you're right, the millions of dollars could be put towards buying properties or building properties, or tiny homes are actually the fix for a lot of this stuff, but that's a bylaw thing. Like we need the bylaw to say, okay, so this section of Edmonton is tiny home approved, so let's build 500 tiny homes there. We have one of them in Edmonton. It's Veterans Village. Look it up. It's amazing. So these are veterans that are unhoused that are put into these little tiny homes until they can get back up on their feet again, or that's it. But they have a space that's their own now, and it's safe, right? We have an engineer that's local as well that was doing hempcrete, and hempcrete would be absolutely amazing for this culture. And it doesn't need to be hemp, it could be corn fibers or other plant fibers to make the bricks out of. But they're pest resistant, like mice don't like them, so you're not going to get infested with pets. And if there ever was an issue with like a biohazard or something like that, you basically hose the stuff down and it's fine again. Like there's lots of options out there. They just need to put the money in the right place. As someone who has managed businesses in the past, I just look at the duplicated services here in this city, where if somebody had a really good overview of how everything was working, that was like, I don't know, an efficiency expert or something, they could say, okay, well, let's take the money from this and put it over here, sort of idea, and the amount that we're spending on the healthcare and the enforcement could totally be put towards helping with this issue. And there's so many empty buildings here in this city as well. Like everybody was saying Remand Center, and then people are like, no, not the Remand Center, because of the stigma around it being a previous, like a jail, right? Asbestos is a bad thing too. Apparently Northlands has mold in it, so that's why that's not suitable for a space. But you have people out there dying. So what's more dangerous? Put them in an area where there isn't mold. And I'm sure that's going to be safer for them than staying out in minus 20 at night trying to survive, right?
Also, I guess there's a conception that thinks there's like a conception in our Edmonton community and in my Chinese community as well that like there's a connection between houselessness and drug use, and I'm not sure how related those two things are. I'm still a little bit lost because there are people who are houseless who don't use drugs, but like why do people who use drugs have a higher risk of ending up houseless, or why do houseless people start using drugs?
Okay, so it's not always addictions that's putting people out on the street. It's usually they're out on the street first and then there's substance abuse after that. Like we've gone over before, anybody can end up on the street, right? Like it's bad right now in the economy, like there's a lot of us. I'm not a rich person either. I'm one paycheck away from being on the streets. If I got sick for some reason, I could end up out there, and that's what a lot of people are facing. But when you're out there, in order to stay where you're feeling warm, or to be able to escape reality because you don't want to be facing whatever it is that you're facing, that's when the alcohol and or substance use comes into play. A lot of them are just doing it to escape, period. Alcohol will make you feel warmer, right? And a lot of the other substances will make you feel warmer. Unfortunately, science says, no, you're actually worse at risk of freezing to death when you're using substances or alcohol. You may feel warmer, but that's not what's actually happening in your body. And hypothermia can happen at 10 degrees.
I guess this has been an issue on my mind, right? Because I did a lot of volunteering in Chinatown ever since I was younger. Probably not as much as you, but I've been trying my best. And I recently this summer I got a job at a place in Chinatown, and I guess a lot of elderly Chinese people, they have this misconception that these people on the streets are dangerous. These people on the streets, they feel unsafe around them. And it's also kind of because of the city's planning, because both the Chinese community and the houselessness indigenous community they're all minority communities that are vulnerable. And the city put them all in that one area, the Macaulay area, so there has been a lot of, I guess, tension and issues between those two groups. And I was just wondering about, what do you know about that? What are your experiences? And has anyone you were helping complained about any issues with the Chinese community? What do you think that the city can do better for these communities that are both vulnerable and marginalized and have been marginalized for decades, basically?
Yeah, I'm actually in a really unique position in that one of our volunteers with lived experiences put me in touch with Chinatown Transformation Society.
Yes, CTC.
Yes, and that was an amazing learning experience for me, especially as an Indigenous woman, because the Chinese people have gone through a similar, almost genocide type of issue
for years.
Yeah, with the railway and moving in here to Canada. We're the original people, but then some of the people that were brought in by the colonial settlers were also almost wiped out, used as slaves, just like we were. So the Chinese people have gone through some similar trauma to the Indigenous people. It's kind of sad, like you said, that everybody's in that area, and I've heard complaints from both sides. Unhoused people just trying to survive, they walk into a business and they just want to use the bathroom or something like that, or they're hungry, they're going to steal, I wish that could be prevented, but that's kind of the reality. If you're hungry, what are you going to do? If there's food, you're going to try and steal it, and that sucks for the business owner, because I can see it from the business owner's perspective as well, because I used to manage a convenience store once upon a time, right? Some of the policies put in places by businesses, though, are a little ridiculous, and if they address some of those things, that would help out that relationship a little bit more. Like the convenience store that I operated, you have dates on all of your everything that's food, and why not just give that to the folks that are hungry instead of throwing it in the dumpster so that they have to go back in there and dig through your dumpster to be able to get the meal.
I thought of that as well. Actually, for a while, I was like, because it just makes sense. Why doesn't business just give those foods that are near expiry, that need to be thrown out anyways, right, to people who actually need it? And I think one of the reasons is because if they give them that food that is near expired and that person gets sick or passes away, it is a liability for that owner, unfortunately. And a lot of people in Chinatown, they're family-owned businesses, they're immigrants, they're just, like you said, anyone can end up on the streets. Some people who are running these businesses are also one paycheck away from ending up like that, right? So I feel like their policies aren't really, obviously I'm not gonna deny there are a lot of people in my community who hold harmful and bad stigmatizations against unhoused people. But I think also a part of them is just fear from losing the stuff that they earn hard for, right? They don't want people to steal, and they don't know what to do to stop that. And I feel like in Chinese culture, a lot is there's no gray area. It feels really black and white. So it's either you stop it completely using extreme measures, or you just let it happen, right? And I just feel like a lot of these people, they're not really doing it out of, I hate houseless people. I don't think houseless people deserve food. They're more, I'm scared for my business, and I'm scared of losing the things that I get up every morning to make, that I get shipping from my family. They're scared as well, right? So it's I feel like something that would really help both communities is just, do you know Revita Chinatown?
I think I've had experience with them too, yeah.
It's they kind of hold these Chinatowns after dark, where they get everybody on the street to kind of have some fun together. I feel like more experiences like that would be so helpful, because both of these communities in this Chinatown area are vulnerable. They're hurting. They need help. And I feel like just, it isn't even about, I'm just going to help this group, or I'm going to help this group. It's more about these two groups, how can they help each other? And what can we do to get these groups to want to be near each other, to like each other more, right? I think that's something that a lot of groups, such as your organization, should maybe consider, so that these people living in these areas can feel safe at home, or without a home, they can feel safe where they are.
Yeah, no, I attended one of the Chinatown After Dark events, and it was absolutely amazing. And you're right, I wish they would do more of those things. The business owners from Chinatown are going to have a hard time trying to be empathetic enough to put themselves in the shoes of the people that are unhoused. If they understood the struggle that the unhoused folks were going through, I think they would have a little bit more compassion. These folks aren't stealing and doing these things because they want to be malicious. They're doing it because they're trying to survive, right? And there are a couple of businesses in Chinatown that are compassionate to the folks, and you'll find that those people that are compassionate to folks, their windows aren't getting broken, their sidewalks are being shoveled when it snows. The unhoused folks are going to help out those people when they find out that those people are willing to be open enough to help them, right? I know there's one particular building in Chinatown that keeps on getting its windows broken all the time, and that's because the person that manages that building is terrible to the unhoused people. So the unhoused people are sort of targeting that building, and that's sad, but people do need to try and get along, 100%. And what Jordan and those folks are doing is absolutely amazing. Kudos to them. They've been very helpful to us as an organization as well. There was so much construction going on with roads and stuff down around where we serve in the Boyle-McCauley area, and we lost our parking lot that we normally do our staging in, and that's so important because we need sort of an area where we're out of sight just for half an hour so we can load everything up and get out on the street and go, right? We can't just load up on the street, because then we have folks coming, can we get this, can we get this, can we get this? And we have to tell them, no, I'm sorry, we're not ready yet, and they get frustrated, and it's never a good situation. So we were lucky enough to know Jordan, and I just hey, we need a parking lot for 2 weeks, can you help me out? And he was right away, you know, and that small gesture of finding us a place where we could park our cars that didn't cost the volunteers money, stage our U-Haul, that was freaking amazing. It's awesome, you know. You know, I've met a couple of the other members of that as well that are business owners in Chinatown, and I must have been Asian in a past life because I love the food, you know, and I'm the person that will go into that little mom and pop shop that nobody else will touch because I love the food. And the Chinatown After Dark, they had guides, which were super awesome, which I'm like, okay, so I'm craving a bubble tea, where should I go? You know, and he showed me a brand new place that I just absolutely adore. It's open until 11 o'clock at night. You go in there for your bubble tea and all your little snacks and stuff, and it's comfortable and inviting, and a lot of the younger generation have started taking over from the older generation, and they're the ones who want to revitalize that area again. And I was really excited listening to them talk about everything.
Yeah, I feel like something that is so helpful for this community is just getting them to know each other more and getting them to, you know, feel more comfortable around each other, more familiar, and to like each other. Because, like you said, together you can really do a lot more, and it feels much safer and better. Yeah, I aim to do that too with this podcast I'm putting out, because I know a lot of people from the Chinese community who have stigmatized views against unhoused people. Like, for example, my own parents do. And I'm like, I don't want this to keep going on. I don't want this to happen. And a lot of the times in Chinese culture, it's like if it has something to do with politics and stuff like that, or it has something to do with things that are sensitive, such as drug consumption, houselessness, just stay away from it. Just only care about yourself, get good grades, get a good job, that's it. Stay away from this type of stuff. But, you know, I don't want that. I want to change the narrative. I want to show people that this is worth doing, and there are a lot of people that you can help because you have so much to give.
Yeah.
So
anybody that has a little bit extra has enough to give, right? And that's how human society should be operating. We should all be watching out for one another and taking care of one another. And I know with Asian culture, that's sort of not how Asian culture works, you know. Children are expected, get those grades, get doctor, lawyer, those kinds of things, you know. Like, they want to be successful, and that's what's built into that culture. And I completely understand that, but that's why these fight so much, right? Because Chinese culture is all about success, and Indigenous culture is all about sharing. Yeah, so, you know, it can happen, and I think it's the younger generation that's going to make that happen, right? There's some wonderful people in Chinatown, you know, that I've met, and I think it's just a matter of sitting down and listening to some of these folks' stories, how they ended up there, why it's such a struggle, why they can't get off the street again. Do I have time to share a story?
yeah, of course, no problem.
Okay. So we have a Christmas GoFundMe that's going to be coming up for Water Warriors. We've been serving this couple for a little over a year now, I think. Her name is Jess and his name is Joe, and they've been unhoused for a little over 10 years. Joe does have a disability. I think it might be FASD or a brain injury. So Jess does all the advocacy for him. And as a couple, this is why they're still unhoused. And this is why they're staying outside, because there are no spaces in shelters where couples can stay together. Recently, they adopted a little dog. This little guy, his name's Bean, and he's a little bit of a nervous guy. He's scared of just about everything, but he's like Jess's emotional support. And I believe that any unhoused person should be able to have a pet as well. You know, like, it's a hard life for a pet, but that is their mental health and well-being, the human being that is taking care of this animal, right? So they live in the River Valley, and they've been in the River Valley for 10 plus years. They don't use. It's just that Joe hasn't been able to work because of his disability, right? And just advocating for him and needing to be there for him all the time has not been able to work either, because she's his full-time caregiver. They've been together for a long time. They love one another dearly, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be together. So keeping appointments with housing workers is very, very difficult. If you don't have a phone that tells you what day it is, what time it is, those kinds of things, how are you supposed to keep an appointment with your housing worker, right? So, you get that paperwork started and everything, and then you miss one appointment, you're back at the bottom of the list again, and have to make another appointment, blah, 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 blah. Getting AISH now is more difficult because they've put a lot more stipulations in place. They don't deserve to be unhoused. They really don't. We don't take care of our disabled folks either, and that's a lot of our folks on the streets right now. The frostbite that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years has caused a lot of amputations, so now that person's disabled, probably not going to be able to work. They should be on some kind of disability supports, AISH, whatever. We should be supporting these folks. They're not going to be able to be productive members of society anymore. They're not physically able to do that, and probably not mentally able to do that either. So Jess and Joe, we kind of want to jumpstart for them. We're pretty sure if we can give them 6 good months in a housed situation, provide food for them, provide the apartment for them, that should give them enough time to hopefully apply for AISH for Joe and get that little bit of income coming in. Maybe get some supports in there for him, a companion or something that can help him out during the day for a couple of hours a day or whatever, so Jess can go in and get work. They could probably be housed and off the streets. So we're going to try and do a Christmas themed fundraiser for these folks, and hopefully raise enough money for 6 months of rent and groceries and stuff to give them a fighting chance to get up off the street. So, everybody has their story. It's just a matter of people taking that time to look people in the eye and listen to them. And you'll find that small kindnesses will turn some of that gruff exterior into somebody who is so grateful that they're crying for that small kindness, right? Because we have to remember, we all have masks and we all have shells, and especially people who have been through a lot of trauma. So that's why people may come across as looking mean or gruff, but they actually really aren't. There are some folks that are dangerous. We recommend when we're going out and we're doing our volunteering that we do go out in pairs. Nobody does go out by themselves, but I go out by myself all the time, and so do a lot of the other team leaders. But we have years of experience too. We read a lot of body language and stuff like that, so we sort of we watch and you approach and, hey friend, can I help, blah blah blah. And if they don't want your help, they're going to tell you, go away, I don't need you. Or if they need that whatever you're offering, they will take that usually with a whole lot of gratitude.
It's really sweet of you guys. Thank you so much for talking to me. I feel like I learned a lot.